All right, a couple of you have already asked, so what I've done here is this is the schedule for this week, just so you know what's going on. Today we're going to go over Chapter 13. I'll do the lecture, then we'll do the review questions and the test review. Tomorrow we're going to do two things. We're going to do a couple of the problems at the end of Chapter 13. I think that we're going to do two as a class, and I'm going to assign one of them. I'm not sure which. All right, but I'll figure that out tonight. Plus, it says there lab/WEG. That's that work ethic grade. So I'm going to have to meet with each one of you tomorrow in that side conference room. All right, just like for 5 minutes or so as we did last semester. Wednesday, we'll have the written test on Chapter 13. The good news is we'll have the written test on Chapter 13. I'm not going to put anything from Chapter 13 on the test. All right, so that'll be it for the Chapter 13 stuff. Then after we get done with that, we'll lecture on Chapter 14, which are files. Same kind of thing with the review questions and the test review. Thursday, we'll do a couple of the Chapter 14 problems, and the rest of it will be lab. Notice the Chapter 13 homework and the Chapter 14 homework will be due 1 week from Wednesday. All right. And Friday, we'll have the written test on Chapter 14. The rest of Friday will be a lab, so that'll mean pretty much from 8:30 until 11:55 will be lab. A week from today, on Monday, will be lab. I'd like it, if possible, if you had everything that you're going to turn in turned in by the 29th. Then you don't have to worry anymore about this book or turning in anything from the book or whatever. And then Tuesday, so a week from tomorrow, on the 28th, we'll have the hands-on test. Now I've got chapters 11 through 14. I'm not planning on putting anything from Chapter 13 on it. Nothing specifically from Chapter 13. And we will have some kind of a test review on Monday. I'm not going to do a pre-test. All right, but I will let you know pretty much what's going to be on there. Bottom line is, other than Chapter 13, which we're going to go over right now in events, pretty much anything else is fair game because you've now gone over everything. But I'll give you some kind of an idea of what to expect. All right, and then Wednesday, so a week from Wednesday, we'll start the database portion of the class. All right, I've been working on that already. I've got about 20 lectures out there, and there'll be probably double that by the time we start on that. All right, but we're going to, on that day, Wednesday, I'm going to talk about databases for about the first hour, then we're going to get on, we're going to start creating them right away. All right, and the stuff we do, you won't have to be turning that stuff in right away. But I just want you to get used to it. We're gonna actually create the same database twice. We're gonna do it the first time in more a console manner, and then we're gonna do it again in more of a GUI manner. So you get to see the difference between the two. After we've done that, it's up to you. You can do it either way. It's not really going to matter. All right. So that hopefully that gives you some kind of an idea of what's going on this week and pretty much most of next week also. All right. So I'm on page 607. This is probably as close to as they get in this book to linking back to stuff we had in the class last semester for those of you who were in that class. Because they talk about event handling key press events, handling mouse events, etc. Now, it isn't exactly the same stuff we did last semester, but we looked at that a little bit with JavaScript. All right. So as you can see on the page here, we want to learn about event handling. We want to learn about delegates, declare our own events and our own handlers. And some of this stuff we've actually been doing already. All right. So when we get to some of it, you'll go like, didn't we already do that? Yeah, we have. All right. Handle control component events, handle mouse and keyboard events, manage multiple controls, and learn how to continue to go on and find out even more about this stuff. All right. So the author says that in many ways, when you think about this book and you think about where you have come in this class, Again, I understand many of you are probably feel much more of a comfort level working with console apps as opposed to working with GUI apps. Okay? That said, what you'll find by and large out there in the quote real world unquote is there are more people using GUI apps than there are using console apps. All right? It's nice to have apps where you can set up menu interfaces and you can have graphics, etc. All right. I mean, if you don't believe that, just think about it. If you ever worked with computers years ago, you had a DOS interface and everything looked like the console. Today, it's very rare that people do anything with DOS. You look at your desktop right now and it's all graphic. That's what people want, right? That's what people expect. So they define event handling here. Again, it says an event is a reaction to an occurrence in a program. That's not bad. And you've got to look at it this way, that basically the way that this works is that any programming language, and C# is another one of them, kind of sits there all the time and waits for you to do something. And then it reacts to what you do. Now, when you wrote console programs, you had things in there like you had a write statement, followed by some kind of a read line. And you told the user, enter your age. And then you had a read line where you read that in. All right? Or, you did a graphical program where you maybe had a text box with a label next to it that said age. And you put an age in there. Okay? But when you entered something in, every time you interface at all with your program, an event is taking place. Now, most of the events that we've handled so far have been things like click events. A click event for a button, a click event for a menu, etc. But whether you realize it or not, if I come in here just to show you this, and probably I've mentioned this before, if I haven't, then that's shame on me. But if I come in here, you don't have to do this, but if I come through here, well, it's going to take a while, I guess, and I start to create a brand new, I'm just going to come in here and create a brand new console program. It's just going to be, it's junk. But ideally, what you know already is anytime you take control, any control, and you put it on your screen. So I'll put a Windows format here. I'm just going to call it junk. All right. So when I come through here, and I'm not worried right now about an interface or anything else, but if I come in here, whoops, and I come through and I grab a text box, for example, and I just drag it here. I don't care right now that it says nothing. I don't care that there's no label. None of that bothers me. So I'm just going to take a text box and a button. I'm not going to rename them. I'm not going to do anything because this is just a garbage thing that I'm creating here. You already know that this is called button 1, and if I double click it, it brings up the default event, which is a click event. You all know that already. And you may or may not know that if I double click the text box, it brings up the text changed event. So if I ask you to enter your first name, or let's say me, and I put Jeffrey in there, that's 7 different change events that are happening. Does that make sense to you? Jeffrey. All right. So what you can do, why is that important? Because if I want to set it up so that the system, literally, I'm asking you for a salary, and it doesn't accept non-numerics, I can check every time you enter a keystroke. And if the keystroke you enter is not a number, I can refuse it. You understand that? So that's event handling right there in a nutshell. So you have the ultimate power as a programmer to handle events any way either you see fit or if you're doing something for someone in whatever way they want it done. All right? So that's, just remember that as we start because that's what they're talking about here. It says here, a program uses an event to notify a client that something happens to an object. I just showed you that because it was showing you what happened to a text box object or to a button object. Most of this stuff takes place, as they say there, at runtime. And at runtime means when the program is actually executing. All right? I mean, you can sit there and you know this as well as I do. If I take this button, as I just showed you, and I don't put any code here, I can run the program. Program will run. There are no errors in it. And it even does a little bit because when I press this, you can see how it changes. But nothing is really happening because there's no code associated with it. And that's exactly what the author is talking about in here. All right. Now, a couple things, and most of this stuff, again, is on the test, but they say GUI programs are event-driven. What they mean is some kind of an event happens, the program reacts to it. That's what event-driven is. All right, and it says, they say a button raises an event or fires an event or triggers an event. It doesn't matter which one of those you use. You'll see all of them in books. All right, and they have you do a real simple example where you just put this here on the screen. Now, this is a little bit different because this is something we have not talked about before. And what the author mentions in here is they talk about sender and they talk about event args, which we have talked about, but not really. All right. Sender basically is what caused that event to fire. And 99 times more than that out of 100, it's you. You did something that caused that to fire. You are the sender, for lack of better words. The event args, most of the time, you won't use these. But when will you? I've mentioned this to you before. Let's say that I am programming a simple C# game. And for that game, I want you to be able to use your mouse. All right? And, when I got the mouse and I'm doing this, what am I doing? I'm moving the mouse, right? So I'm changing the X and the Y coordinates of the mouse when I'm doing that. Those are the X coordinates. So positive as I go to the right, negative as I go to the left. My Y coordinates, positive as I go down, negative as I go up. All right? That kind of an idea. But if I was working with mouse coordinates, I might use that event args. Other than that, they're not used that often. But they are there in case you do want to work with either or both of them. All right? So, a method that performs a response, a task in response to an event, is an event handler. We just looked at two of them. We looked at the text changed, and we looked at the button click. Those are examples, again, of event handlers. And the author literally runs the program, so when you click the button that says change label, it goes from hello to goodbye. I don't think we have to go over that because you could write that like that in a second. All right. Now, this is a little bit different. If you take a look at this, this is the top of page 610, and the author says on the top of the page, the event handler method is also known as an event receiver. The control that generates the event is the sender. That's this. All right? So if we do this, notice what we're doing here. When you click the button, what we're saying is we want you to take that text box and we want you to tell us who the sender is. Well, I said it's you, but really it's you doing something to that control. So the sender here, this is its full name. System.windows.forms.button.text. And its value is change label. All right, that's the value of this button. But that basically is it. So you can see, remember, one of the things we always get put in for us at the top of the program is using system. That's this. All right. Using system.windows, that's this. Using system.windows.forms, that's this. I believe that's at the beginning of each one of your programs. That's why you can just say button dot something. You don't have to say system.windows.forms, etc. You could say that, but that would be kind of overkill. All right. And notice what else they're doing here. It's like, wow, this isn't really doing anything. Well, it's just a button. We're not doing anything with the arguments, but they're showing you that there are arguments there. All right. So why is this stuff even important? It is if you're going to make a really interactive program, be it a game or something else, when the user is constantly clicking on the screen to make something happen. All right. There used to be a real popular game. This was years ago. It sounds hokey now, but maybe you saw it. Your screen would have like a little pair of eyes on it. All right, just a little couple circles, and you were supposed to try to click those. But every time you got close with your mouse, they would move someplace else. All right, that was a very interactive kind of game. You were always checking to see where the mouse, coordinates were, type of an idea. If you had something like that, this would be a lot more important. Okay? Now, it gets a little hinky, for lack of better words, because they're talking about this right here. Because what they're saying is, if we typed in this, I'm not going to type in a bit of this, but if we typed in all of the code that you see right there, all right, all of that code, we could build the button ourselves. All right, so we're building it, we're telling it where to be placed on the screen, we're telling it its name, we're telling it its size, its tab index, etc. So there are actually two ways that you can go and create things that go into your program. You can drag and drop, which is what we've been doing, which is really basically what people do virtually 100% of the time, or you could build it from scratch. The other thing to realize about this, if you look up on the screen here, is if we go right here, and this is that file we've never really worked with because I've told you, for lack of better words, not to touch it. But if we look on here, if you look up on the screen, you'll notice that we've got what? We've got this form1designer.cs file. And if we click that, we start taking a look at it, it's going to have the same kind of stuff. If we were to come in and start changing colors and positions and everything else, this file would be added to. So this is one of those system files that gets created and it gets updated as you do the drag and drop. All right. And they're even telling you right now that if you do this by hand, the system, for lack of better words, is kind of dumb. If you manually put all this stuff out there, then you manually have to associate the button's click event with the event handler. But if you do it with drag and drop, this is all done for you. All right. And they give you some more stuff. The statement concerns a click event. An action fired when you click a button. We've already talked about that. I believe this is on the test. Event wiring. Connecting an event to a resulting action is called event wiring. That's what this thing in the gray here, in figure 13.5 on page 611, that's what it's doing. In fact, sometimes in books, you'll even see it referred to as wiring up the event, because that's exactly what we're doing. All right? Now think about it. Let's assume that I'm asking, I've got a form on my screen where I'm asking you a whole bunch of questions. How old are you? What's your favorite color? What's your favorite this? What's your favorite that? And then what I do is, based off of that, I send you to another screen. But Amin says his favorite color is orange, just let's say. So I make the background color orange, that kind of thing. All right. If that's the case, and if I'm building something on the fly, this kind of thing becomes much more important. All right. So if you're doing more interactive programming than we've done, all right. And again, virtually everything that we've done this semester has been something along these lines where we have only a single form. But you can have multiple forms. I can come in here and right mouse click on my project, choose add new item, and I can choose to put in another form. Click add. Now I've got two forms. There's form 1 and there's form 2. All right? And I can have those forms appear and disappear. Now I can create them like this, or I can literally create them by saying, form 2 equals new form. That's the object-orientedness, and I can build that on the fly. So there's a lot of ways that you could do this. So again, if I was writing an interactive program, or if I wrote a program, and let's say on here that I asked you, let's say it wouldn't be a splash screen, but let's say that this one right here would ask you your name, it would ask you your employee number, and then maybe it would have 3 radio buttons. Very similar to stuff we've done before, where it would say, are you hourly, are you commission, or are you piece worker? All right, so you choose, let's say, piece worker, and you click a button. Now it brings up a separate form just for piece workers. Whereas if I'd click commission worker, it would bring up yet a different form for commission workers. And if I created hourly, it would have a different form for hourly workers. All right? But the idea is, what we're more concerned with here is not that as much as giving you the language fundamentals and having you understand that. But really, when you think about it, you should be able to do that. And there are things like there's a hide command where you can use to hide forms, and a show command that you can use to show forms. So you can do a lot of hiding and showing and make things appear and disappear, all right, as you would need to. Now, probably the hardest part of the chapter, in fact, I would say, in my opinion, the hardest part of the chapter starts on page 612, and it talks about delegates. And before we even go through it, think about what a delegate is. All right? One of the things that happened right before the break is, remember, we had the high school students come in, and I delegated to you the responsibility, for lack of better words, of being lab assistants. It means I didn't do it, I delegated the responsibility to you. Well, in much the same way, it says a delegate is an object that contains a reference to a method. So it doesn't contain the method, it contains what's typically referred to as a pointer to the method. All right, it says a delegate encapsulates a method. And then they give you an example that's similar to what I told you. All right, they use the federal government or the government. And they say that, for example, states send delegates to presidential nominating conventions. You can't bring the entire state of Missouri there, so you've got different delegates that you send there. And they're supposed to be representing the state. All right. It says, similarly, C# delegates provide a way for you for a program to take alternative courses of action not determined until runtime. That's the key point right here. You can use delegates. Now, sometimes when people read this stuff, they're like, okay, I understand this. I even understand what you're saying. But couldn't you write this without delegates? Anything you write with delegates, you can write without delegates. All right? The reason that you use delegates is typically it results in less code, and after you understand how they work, it's typically easier to write code with delegates than it is without it. All right, the example that they give, however, isn't a great one. Turning up to page 613, the author says right near the top of the page, a C# delegate is similar to a function pointer in C++. Well, what the heck does that mean? You may or may not remember this, those of you who were in the JavaScript class last semester, but when you're working with JavaScript, not only can you pass variables to functions, you can pass functions to functions. That's what they're talking about right here. All right? With a function pointer. You don't pass the function, you pass a pointer to the function. Okay. And as it says, the pointer is a variable that holds the address of where that actually lives. Now you do this, and this isn't probably going to be that clear. All right, and it's not that my explanation is necessarily that good or that bad, but for you to understand this, you have to read the chapter. All right, and I don't think she does the most fantastic job of explaining this. There's a couple things in here that I want to mention that she doesn't say. I think would have made it a little clearer. So notice it says here, I'm on the middle of page 613, you declare a delegate using the keyword delegate followed by an ordinary method. All right, so this is delegate, and it says we're going to have in here a method called greeting delegate. It's going to have a string passed into it that'll be referred to as S, and it'll return nothing. Now that should make sense to all of you because we've talked about method signatures a lot in the last few chapters. All right. So it says any delegate can encapsulate any method that has the same return type. Well, what does that mean? That means that I can call greeting delegate and I can pass, as long as I pass it as string, I can use it in a lot of different ways. Now, greeting delegate's kind of a dumb name because you would think, well, if I'm going to have something called greeting, I'm going to pass it hello or something like that. But when you think about it, I could have a greeting delegate where I would maybe pass in greetings from 4 or 5 different languages as an example. All right. So the example that they use here is, you're like, well, what is this? It says, for example, the following hello method is a void that takes a string parameter. This is the kind of thing that we've written. This method right here, the one that you see, should be nothing new to you, shouldn't surprise you. All right, that would expect, for example, if I passed into this method, forgetting about this right now, if I called hello and I passed Kim into it, that would say hello, Kim. All right, and the 0 there is a placeholder. The S is what we pass in, so that would be Kim. That's the way we've done it. All right, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing it that way. All right, but it says because the hello method matches the greeting method or the greeting delegate definition, you can assign hello to this. What does that mean? That means that, for lack of better words, this thing that we just created right here will handle, and I can associate it with any method that passes in a string and returns nothing. So now I'm able to, if I want to, I can handle all of these in exactly the same way, or not. All right. So in the example that they give here, and this is actually, believe it or not, it's a pretty good example. All right, so let's try to go through it and see what they say. All right, so what do we have here? Well, notice that when you define a delegate, notice it's line 2. You do it at the top of the program right after your using statement. So this says we're going to have in here a delegate. It's called greeting delegate. It expects a string. It returns nothing. All right, that should make sense to all of you. All right, so then we come in here and we say, okay, we've got this thing called hello. We got this thing called goodbye. So if we called it like we looked at on the previous page, and we called hello and passed it Kim, it would say hello, Kim. If we called goodbye and passed it Kim, it would say goodbye, Kim. All right. But now what we're doing is we are associating right here the delegate with both hello and with goodbye. All right. So it's going to come in here. Notice it says greeting method delegate. Okay. It's going to say the greeting is, and the first time we pass it, it should say the greeting is hello, Kathy. The second time it should say the greeting is goodbye, Bob. All right. Like I said, with the examples that she's giving in here, you know, you look at that, what am I gaining out of doing? Absolutely nothing. But when you write more complex types of programs where you want to be able to treat a series of methods in the same way, a delegate can be a very good thing to use. All right. So if we look at this and then we look at it, did she show it on there? There it is. All right. And again, that's the bottom of page 614. So the author says at the bottom of the page, delegates are useful in a method reference that can be passed to another method. We have just touched the surface on what you can do with this language. Not only can you create not only can you create additional forms, and I just showed you how to do that, but if I have a public method in one form, it can call a public method in another form. And if I want to make sure that those are handled the same way, I can use a delegate, a public delegate, to do that. All right? That's where you start to harness some of the problems. All right? So the author says you should understand at least a little about delegates because they're used in code that responds to events. So in other words, much of the stuff that's done with these is done for you behind the scenes. But what they're saying is, if you ever wanted to peek underneath the hood, so to speak, and take a look at it, all right, this is the kind of stuff that you'd see. All right, so next they have you create what are called composed delegates. This is the top of page 615. And the author says you can assign one delegate to another using the equal operator. You can also use the plus sign or the plus equal. So if you use the plus equal, you know what that means. X plus equals 6 is the same thing as saying x equals x plus 6. And if you say delegate 1 plus equal delegate 2, that's combining the two the two of them together. And that's what the author is saying right here. All right, so with the example that they give is they say, notice we've got this first delegate, which is going to be hello, and then we've got the second delegate, which is goodbye. Then we combine them into one. Again, with the examples that the author is giving here, this isn't showing you very much. But by using that plus equals, now you get the same results with just one delegate as we did before with printing out two delegates. All right. Now, does that make sense? Yeah, clear as mud. All right. So read the chapter. The only way that I can be sure that you're going to at least have gone through this is the first time I'm doing this, is I'm going to ask that you do the two you do it exercises that are in this chapter. That's going to be part of your homework. All right. That you don't have. You have to key these in from scratch. All right. And I will give you a hint which the author does not give you. In fact, the author makes it sound like put this into two files. Have this project and then put in all this stuff and then put in main in another file. Don't do that. All right? Why? Because it took me a half an hour to figure out why the flipping thing didn't work. It's because you have to put everything into the same file. And it was funny because I for the life of me, I couldn't figure out why it wasn't working. I went home and I was like, geez, I wonder if they have to be in the same file. I made one simple change, boom, everything worked. So you're going to do the you do it exercise, and notice what the author says. You create two delegate instances in the next step. So you're going to have something here called discount delegate. Again, other than the word delegate, everything you see right here in blue, that's not new. You should understand all of this. Okay? We've got something, it's a method called discount delegate. It passes in a sale amount. Since it's a ref, we know that we're able to change sale amount, and it's a permanent change. We know that since it's a void, it's not returning anything. All right? And this is a delegate. So kind of look at it as kind of like being a placeholder. So you type in this. In other words, you have to add the static system console, and you have to add that line right there. Oh, that line. Then on the next page, you've got to basically put in all the stuff that's in bold that's on page 6, that's on pages 617, 618. All right? And what it does is it says, okay, it says here that if your sales amount was greater than or equal to 1,000, you get a 5% discount. Otherwise, you get no discount. Okay? What they could have done right here, and I don't know why the author didn't do it, this is the kind of thing I want you to look at this, because as a programmer, this is the kind of thing you have to understand. The author right here, and let me just grab all of their code. Let's see if I can grab all of it at least. It's not going to, because it'll all go on one line. This line right here, these two lines in blue that are right there, are saying if you haven't purchased over $1,000 or more, there's no discount. Does that make sense? Discount equals 0. Well, I wouldn't have done it like this. Up here, this line right here where it says double discount, everybody see this line right there where I've got the mouse going nuts? I would have said their double discount equals 0. Because had you said right there, double discount equals 0, you don't need an else statement. You should always strive to make your code much more intuitive. So you're assuming there is no discount if you put here double discount equals 0. Then if you find out that your sales were over $1,000 or more, then you set a discount. And there's just an if, there's no else. Because if it wasn't greater than or equal to 1,000, you just keep the discount at 0, which you would have set it to up there. That's the kind of way you should shoot code. Sometimes what I don't like about what the author, what she does, and maybe she's doing this because she thinks it makes it clearer. I don't know. All right? And again, I would have put curlies before and after this, curlies before and after this. This is not part of the else. This you want to do regardless. All right? So then you come in here, so that's your standard discount. Then you come in and you add referred discount. So you can have an S or you can have a P. All right? So notice the amount of sale was $1,000. It's greater than or equal to 1,000, so they get a 5% discount, which is $50. All right? Then we've got another thing where they're preferred. If they're preferred and they get $1,000 or more, then, all right, what you do is you set it equal to 10% instead of 5%. Okay? And they show all that stuff. It's not hard, but it'll take you a little bit to type it in. And ideally, you'll get something out of typing it in. Then, turning up to page 619, 620, 621, they have you go and take your program that you just created, which is called Discount Delegate Demo, take the folder, make a copy of the folder, and call it Discount Delegate Demo 2, and then make the changes that they show on pages 619, 620, and 621. If you do that and you follow their steps, that's pretty simple. All right. So that's all fine and dandy, but then turning up to 622, the author says, okay, what about declaring your own events? All right. And what does that mean? That means if you want something special to happen that wouldn't normally happen, so you've got some kind of a control that normally doesn't react to something, but you want that control to react to something. Then you can make it react by adding your own event handler to it. And that's what the author is showing you right here. And unfortunately, I don't really like the example that she gives, but we'll just work with what she has there. All right? And she's got this thing on here that's working with a GPA. And basically what it's doing is it's checking here to see whether or not it's empty. All right? So think about it. Let's suppose that you were asking a user, and you had something in there, and you had a bunch of, you had a form that you created. And you had a field, let's say you had 5 fields. First name, last name, address, city, state, something like that. And if they put in something, let's suppose you asked them to put in the state themselves. You didn't have a drop down, you asked them to put it in. And let's say that you had an array, and that array had the list of 50 states in there. You could check, and if they typed in their own state, and let's say for state they left it blank, or they spelled Missouri wrong, all right, you could check and then have your own event fire saying, that's not, this Missouri, M-I-S-S-O-U-R-E, for example, is not a valid state. Now, typically the system wouldn't react to that, but it would be because you'd be putting your own event in there and handling it in whatever way you wanted it to be handled. And that's what the author is talking about in here. Again, it's a fairly complex topic. And much of the stuff that happens when you do your drag and drop and you write your own code, that's what's happening. You put some code in there, but the system is still doing things, a lot of things behind the scenes for you. All right, I'm going to jump up to 625 here, and the author mentions down towards the bottom of the page, the C# language allows you to create events using any delegate type. However, the .NET framework provides guidelines. So in other words, you're supposed to follow a set of Microsoft rules. All right, so you might not be able to do everything that you want to do. On page 628 is the other. This is the other you do it, and I want you to do this one also. This one I didn't have any problems with. I just followed the instructions from beginning to end. You don't have to do this, but one thing I would recommend, again, you don't have to, but on 631, that's pretty ugly for output. You know, at least I put an extra right line in after each one of these. All right, you don't want to do it, I don't really care. Okay, 632, handling control component events. Handling events requires understanding several difficult concepts. Again, the good news is most of it happens for you automatically. And that's what the author is saying in here. But these are all different types of events that actually happen. All right. And we've talked a little bit about this before, but just kind of as a review, if you look in here, one thing that we mention is when you do this, you know, it brings up that click event for the button. That's nothing new. You all know that. But if I come back to here, I'm going to go back into my design right there. And if I come in here and I click that lightning bolt, you'll notice that the only thing that has something by it is the click routine. But if you look here, I'm not going to count these, but my guess is there's well over 20 different events that I can have the button respond to if I want to. And virtually all controls have anywhere between 20 and 100 different events for which you can add code. All right? Typically, the only ones, you know, like button, click event, etc. But for instance, if I wanted something special to happen, you know, in here, I don't know, they don't even have it anymore. For a while, you could put stuff in for the double click event. All right? But there are other events that I can have in here if I want to do that. Notice, mouse enter, mouse leave. Maybe I want to put in here that as soon as I hover my mouse over that, the background color of the form changes to something. And then when I get out again, it changes to something else. So I have no idea if this is going to work or not, but what I'm going to show you, this should work. If I go here to the mouse enter and I say form1 dot, what is it? Is it this? This dot back color equal red. And it's not going to like it. It's going to want like system dot drawing dot color dot red. It's going to be something like that. All right. Well, let's see now. If I take the mouse, is that pretty obvious what just happened? Now, I didn't put anything on mouse out. Okay, so if I wanted to go back, or let's say that I wanted it to be blue as an example. All right, so let's say that we actually wanted the color of this to be blue. So I come back into here and I grab the form here and I go to back color. Got to go back to here. And I go to back color and I make it blue. All right, now if I come back to the mouse and I click on here again, you just saw the mouse enter, but there's a mouse leave as well. All right, so I can grab the same code that we put in here and just change it to blue. So now, oops, I don't know what I did there. But so now when I run this, all right, that's interactive programming. Okay? If I want something special to happen, for example, I can even set it up so I can base it on coordinates. Let's say that I set it up so that, this is coordinate 0, 0. That if you try going off of there, I can have a message box come up on the screen that says, you are no longer on the screen. If I wanted to do that, I could. All right? And that's what the author is getting to, I believe. And one of the things that's shown here are some of those events to which you can add code if you want to. And that's most of page 632 and the top half of page 633. All right, again, I just showed you a couple of them. And then the author takes it a little further, has you create a very simple program right here with a hello and a click me button. All right. And then the text on the label will say the button was clicked, and they change the background color. Not very different from what I just showed you. You could change the background color of anything. I just did the form, but it could be a control that we change the background color of also, if we wanted to do that. All right, 637. Let's get done with this, and then we'll take a break. So on 637, the author talks about handling mouse and keyboard events. All right. Users interact with GUI apps in multiple ways. There's not just mouse and keyboard, just so you're aware of that. Because many people today who are running your application might be running it on a tablet where they don't even have a mouse. So today there's a whole new bunch of things that are in there. There are touch events, all right? So that you could have a C# app that would react just like, for example, an Android app if you wanted to do that, all right? So as it says, mouse events include all actions a user takes with a mouse. Here are most of them on the bottom of page 637. I'm not going to run through those. Ideally, at least, when you look at them, they make sense just from the name of the routine. When you're working with mouse events, typically it's the X and the Y coordinate that are the most important things. Again, not always, but they typically are. The author has you build a very simple little app that on 639 just shows you exactly where on the screen you are. All right. And then keyboard events, these are a little quirky because notice what they are here. The major events are shown on the bottom of the page here, on the bottom of 639. You've got a key down, a key up, and a key press. The key down is when you press the key. The key up is when you let it go. All right, and if you hold down on it, basically, that's a key press. So you can put code into none, 1, 2, or all 3 of these. All right, if you want something special to happen to react to different keyboard events. And again, the author has you write a little bit of code on the bottom of page 640, right there. This is in the form event, and there's a label in there. And then when you run it, you can see exactly what's happening when you do this. Now you might look at that and go, why would I ever want to do that? You probably wouldn't. The point is you could if you wanted to. That's the more important part. All right. And then finally, the last thing that's really in here, we're almost done with the chapter. On page 642, the author talks about managing multiple controls. And guess what? You already know what focus is. You've used focus. And the important thing to realize, I think I've said this to you before, if I haven't, shame on me, but if I've got this, and I'm just going to make a copy of this, make a couple of them, that when the program's running, and if my mouse is right there, the focus is right there. And if I've got it set up so my tab order goes, let's say, from here to here to here. When I'm right here and I click tab and I go to here, 2 events take place. All right? What's called a blur event takes place when I go from here to here, and A focus event takes place when I go from here to here. And that's what the author is talking about, is the as far as playing with focus on page 642. If you want to learn more about this, as she often does at the end of chapters here, if you look on 644 and 645, oops. All right. On 644 at the bottom of the page, continuing to learn about forms and events. She's got another you do it. You don't have to do that one. I told you to do all the ones in the chapter. You can do that one, but literally all it does is it creates, if you click the red button, this form turns red, etc. All right. But if you want to do that one, you can, but you don't have to. All right, let's take a break. It's 9. Let's 9:10. We'll come back. We're going to do the test review or the review questions on pages 649, 650, and 651. Then do the test review.